We're streaming,
we're
live, and you can
streaming
stay
live.
right there.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So this microphone matters.
It really does. Let's get started with the appraiser's office.
All right.
It's 10 o'clock.
You have the budget proposal, the strategic plan,
Yep.
and all of the things that I submitted. I don't know where you want to start. I do have, I would say that the amount that I have on page 2, which says 2015 flat budget amount, that is 2014's budget with the 27th pay period included. But I also believe it includes a budget for retirement, contingencies is included in there. I don't know if that counts against me or if, where that goes.
For
But
14 or for 15?
for 15. I've never budgeted for that in the past, but we do have several employees in our office that are approaching the point in time where they could be retiring. They have their 85 point. We have one in particular that every time someone looks at him the wrong way, he reminds us he has 85 points and doesn't need much to live on. So anyway, that's in there. I have a couple of issues that I'd like to bring up and would hope that you would fund. And one is a reclassification of our GIS director. In my budget proposal and in my strategic plan, I outline my reasoning for that. I believe it's just a matter of time before he finds another job that pays better, just like his predecessor did. This is a big enough county. Our GIS shop is, well, we have 2 employees to run our entire GIS shop. We ought to be able to provide more in the way of services for departments. We already do a pretty good job, and if you talk to the other departments that use GIS mapping services, I believe they're fairly pleased with the service we provide. But I think we could do more, and I do think that this is just a stepping stone to the next better job for most people in that profession in GIS at the salary level we are. So I would hope you'd give serious consideration to reclassifying him at a little higher pay rate.
Would you
I
explain-
believe there's,
Mark, I hate to interrupt you. Could you explain the position and what services are provided by the GIS shop?
the GIS shop is kind of like a multifaceted. We do mapping. We maintain the current ownership records of all the parcels of real estate in the county, and that becomes our base map. The parcel maps become the basis for everything else that's layered on top of them, like the commissioner maps, commissioner districts, voter districts. So the elections office uses it, Public Works, the city uses our maps. The refuse, solid waste, and recycling departments use a lot of our, anything that's spatially oriented, which is everything, uses maps, and then by layering other data on top of those maps, like voter or commissioner districts and voter numbers and things like that, you can make them intelligent. That's what GIS does. It takes basic analog maps, you know, they're digital maps, two-dimensional, and we can layer information on top of those. There's a lot of stuff that we can do that we don't do, and we're not really aggressive about promoting the capabilities of GIS, because once we do and people start to see the kinds of things that they can do with them, they'll want more and more and more and more, and we can't provide that yet. And so I'd like to be able to increase our capabilities by increasing the size of our GIS shop. And I believe that there's every reason to expect that very soon now there's going to be a vacancy within one of the GIS shops here locally that we may be losing our most talented person. I probably shouldn't say any more about that.
Okay.
Since Eric's here.
Are customers asking for this information, or are you just saying if we gave it to them, they'd be happy?
The ones that are asking for it the most are the ones who already have it.
But I mean,
E911,
The additional
no, not the additional
systems that
information.
you're talking about.
What the thing about GIS is that once you see the horizon and you get there and you look over, well, there's something beyond that, and you realize, and it's like a snowball. Well, Commissioner Bueller's smiling knowingly over there because she's a big map user, and so what we're doing now is we're kind of treading water, because we're not really, at one point in time, Nick's predecessor, Lee Allen, was putting on monthly and sometimes, bi-monthly seminars on GIS capabilities and kind of showing people, expanding their horizons and trying to explain to them that the power of GIS and what it could be doing for them to help them. The old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, that's an understatement. So if you create a visual environment where people can understand the data they're looking at better, because it's now a picture rather than just, 14 spreadsheets.
Right.
So it's all put together there in a picture form. It helps people make more informed decisions, better decisions. And so it's a decision-making tool that I think we could promulgate a little more, but we just really can't go and promote that kind of service yet, because it's over-promising and under-delivering.
Right. Does the city of Topeka pay us for the service we
They
provide?
don't. No, they don't.
And they have GIS as well.
Right.
What's the overlap? And I guess I'm not all that familiar with GIS, to be honest with you.
They have their own shop. They take our parcel maps, just as a lot of other organizations take our parcel maps and use them in our aerial photography and things like that. But the city pays for the aerial photography. In reality, we want them to have our parcel maps. We want that to be the authoritative data upon which all other data is layered.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense for everybody, because then we don't have discrepancies where, things don't match.
Okay.
So as long as we're the authoritative source for parcel ownership, the great thing about sharing it with everybody is you do all the QC and scrubbing of the data to make sure it's accurate that you want it to, but still somebody send you an email and say, hey, this isn't right. So we get another, million set of eyes looking at our data and helping us to scrub it and clean it and fix it whenever they find problems with it.
Okay.
So anyway,
Commissioner Cook, I think.
Well, I was just gonna ask, we have 2 GIS mappers now in our shop. Should we be looking at, is this a department or area that should go up? Should we maintain treading water where we're at currently? Where would you forecast Shawnee County in the foreseeable future needing to be?
we have, and I guess I didn't explain the multifaceted, the GIS director takes all of the data and puts it together in the software and creates these multi-layered maps for people. We have, the one other person we have is the person who actually creates the lines, the parcels. Think of them as a polygon, and as they change, sometimes they just change names and they don't change the shape of them. But then other times people will take 40 acres and subdivide it into 200 residential lots and streets and things like that. So those kinds of changes in the topology have to be created. We have a guy that does that. So that's kind of a real basic, that's the foundation though. The parcel lines, the parcel maps are what is created by the one person, Steve Atchison, and then Nick Callahan is the one who takes that data and adds intelligence to it. We do have another person who works part-time in there and updating ownership when deeds come in and things like that. We have been fortunate in a way. I mean, with every bad thing, there's maybe an upside to it. I always look for that anyway. But in the recent years where the real estate market has turned down a little bit, we've had fewer transactions and fewer volume, the lower volume of workload. So we've been able to kind of handle that with a part-time person rather than one full-time person handling the name changes and the splits and combinations and things like that. But I've been looking at the numbers, and I projected that 2014 will be, and maybe it was 2013, but our real estate market has pivoted and it's starting up. All of the indicators are more positive now. For one thing, we recently, I perform ratio studies all the time. The state does it once a year. In 2010, our appraised values, we haven't changed our appraised values since 2009. The real estate market kind of tipped over in '08. I had a meeting with all the big heavy hitters in Topeka in the real estate business, residential mostly. And we determined that nothing had happened yet. And so we didn't change values in 2009. We didn't change values in 2010. We didn't change values in 2011 or 2012. We did lower them a little bit for 2013, about 1%. But I look at ratio. The ratio studies tell you what the comparison is between our appraised values and sale prices. And so in 2010, our median ratio was 101.9, meaning that we were about 2% above market. In 2011, our ratio was 103.6, meaning we were about 3.6 above market. Scary. It's okay to be 3% below, but not 3% above.
Mm-hmm.
In 2012, we were at 101.8. Now, what that tells me is since we didn't change our values, what was happening was sale prices were dipping below our appraised values. That's why our ratios were so high. In 2013, the state just came out with the final statistics. We're at 99.3. There we go. We're above water now. Our appraised values are now maybe 1% below sale prices. I just ran a ratio study this morning, and we're at 97. So without changing our values, now we're about 3% below. That's what we were running clear up until 2008. We were running, and I submit that on January 1, we were at 100% of market value every year. However, throughout the year, sale prices were going up. And so, properties were selling for more than our appraised values. By the time you looked at the average increase throughout the year, it may have been 6% year on year, but spread out the increases from month to month, it only managed to average maybe 3% a year. That's a comfortable place to be. 103.6 is not a comfortable place to be because we're overvaluing stuff a little too much. We're legal if we're between 90 and 110.
Yeah.
But I think the market's going to pick up. And that's the point I'm trying to make here today is, I don't want to sound like Pollyanna or something, but all indicators, probably we've all seen properties go on market in our neighborhood, and how long did they stay on the market before a sold sign went up? Not very long. The average days on market has gone down to about 23 days. So if a property is priced right, it doesn't take very long for those things to sell. And those are all indicators. Also, the absorption rate, the number of houses on the market, the supply. The people who've been in the real estate business forever say 6-month supply is equilibrium. Anything less than a 6-month supply is a seller's market. Anything more is a buyer's market. So we're down to about 5-month inventory. Now, I don't know that all that's just simply because everything is a seller's market. It could be a lot of people. It takes a lot of time for buyers and sellers to intuitively absorb the information they're getting from all sources. And once they have confidence, and I think a lot of people have kept their properties off the market because they think that they might take a loss or sell at the bottom. Nobody wants to sell at the bottom. So I think eventually there'll be a lot more people have confidence in the fact that, hey, it bottomed out, it started to come up, and now's the time to go ahead and, move up in the market, or whatever they've been. This pent-up demand may just break loose. I thought it would break loose a couple of weeks ago when the Fed chair said something about maybe needing to raise interest rates. Well, why didn't that start a buying frenzy? Everybody wants to get in while the money's cheap. It didn't happen. Or if it did happen, those deals haven't been consummated yet, and we haven't seen them. So things are going to turn around. I think they're going to turn around in the direction that they should be going. I think we've just about endured whatever kind of a recession or whatever the economists want to call what we've been going through for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, Commissioner Cook?
Mr. Hickson, across the country, through the Great Recession, we had a number of home foreclosures. And my understanding that banks may sit on homes before putting them on the market so that the market doesn't become flooded with a number of homes. Do we have any idea in Shawnee County, how many homes are bank foreclosed homes that have not been put back on the market yet? Or kind of abandoned homes that is along the same line? There was an article in today's paper about Wichita having one of the highest rates of abandoned homes in the country.
I saw that. I didn't read the article, but it caused the question in my mind is how do they know? Because we don't. We would have to do a lot of research, and it wouldn't be the kind of thing where we could just run a query and say, look for this flag. You're looking for ownership, and so if it's a lending institution, how does our system know one owner from another? Do we have any kind of?
I believe they're indicated as foreclosures, but I tend to find those that are being held or abandoned are, I think, would be pretty difficult.
Yeah.
I think you can check into that for me.
We could run a query and find out, what we've coded as foreclosures on the sales transfer. And, I think the time, like when was it foreclosed on and how long is it, we might be able to run something like that and get some kind of a rough estimate.
And really the reason why I ask is banks don't want to flood the market. They lose the value. They might hold on to a house longer, waiting for the market to come back a little bit, piece them on. If we look at a 5-month supply, if we're looking at more houses coming onto the market, those are more sales, more revenue. And just
Right. Yeah, there's shadow, they call it shadow inventory. The banks, the lenders are smart enough not to just destroy the market by flooding it with properties like that. And they have the financial capabilities to hold on to those properties and not do that. But I don't think we ever really saw the kind of foreclosure activity. And we've had our share, but not overly much like some other markets have. We've had a really, really boring real estate market. I mean,
No.
when some of these TV shows about flippers and these people making tons and tons of money by buying and selling houses in a matter of weeks and things like that, and markets where I had colleagues in Florida saying we can't catch up. The law allows us to raise values 6%. Our values are going up 40%. I have a colleague in Florida. I go on their website and I look at his appraised value, and it's really funny because they got about 5 or 6 of them. Well, I figured out what they are. One of them is the market value. It's way, way, way up here. But they don't use that for anything. They use the assessed value, which goes up every year 6%. And it has not caught up with the market value. The market value went way down, but never did go down as far as their assessed value because they never caught up to the market at 6% a year. Every time Kansas legislators play around with some kind of a cap on values, it just scares me to death because it's the way to destroy the property tax. I think people in Kansas should have, maybe they don't, but they should have a lot of confidence in the way the property tax in Kansas is administered because it's fair and equitable. In other states, it's not, because not all properties go up in value 6% a year, or pick a number. It's arbitrary, whatever you pick. And so you introduce inequities. The longer it's in place, the more inequitable those values become, and the more a joke the property tax becomes to the people who pay it.
But we're not projecting much of an increase in ad valorem taxes for 2015 because of the boats issue, because of exemptions that we've doled out for economic development and other things from what I recall.
Right.
So impact in 2016 we may see, but 2015 I don't want anybody that's listening or paying attention to get the impression that ad valorem taxes are going to go up dramatically for 2015. I don't think they are.
Values or taxes?
Tax collections.
I don't know.
Okay.
That'll be up to the powers that be.
Right.
I'm just talking about values.
Right, I
But-
understand.
How are those two, those two are tied to each other. If you raise the appraised value rate, then hypothetically, there's more taxes that come in
At the same mill levy.
at the same levy.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
at the same mill levy.
Yeah.
They ought to teach in the textbooks reality, because that's reality. In the textbooks, when you study, administration of the property tax, the formula is you take the budget, you determine what the budget is, then you know what your valuation is, you divide the budget by the valuation, and that gives you the mill levy. That isn't the way it works in real life. You take the mill levy times whatever valuation you have, and that's your budget. That's what I'm here about, is how much of that pie I'm going to get for my office.
And I think that's a good point, because the appraiser's job is to appraise property at market value.
Yes.
It's nothing to do with mill levy, taxes, nothing. That's your job, is to provide market value.
Right.
Okay.
And the way,
Commissioner.
you don't raise and lower it at a whim. You have guidelines by which, and the market,
Mhm.
that helps you determine that set value.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, yeah.
Now, that's also something that we all know to be true, but in the 32 years I've been doing this, the common wisdom is that you tell me how much I need to raise the values so you can increase the budget. And, this isn't the first time you're hearing that fairy tale, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really believe that because of the fact that there is a direct connection through experience between increases in value and increases in taxes. And because of the fact that the market went south on us, there's a direct connection with decreases in value and decreases in taxes. Fortunately, our values didn't really go down that much. I do believe they might have dipped as much as 3% in the last few years, but it wasn't as drastic or as traumatic as in some areas of the country that really, really, really took a big hit.
So even though it may be boring, it may be steady and consistent.
Don't you
versus
love
great. Yes.
That's
do.
what I like.
I like those words
Yeah.
better than boring, because,
And
yeah,
that's one of the,
if we had to deal with what we faced the last several years and a real decline in values, that would have been even
Yeah.
more.
if we'd
severe.
been in a market where values were going up 25 to 40% a year, there'd be no connection between values and taxes. You couldn't raise taxes 25% a year just because values went up 25%. The mill levy couldn't stay the same.
No,
It'd have to go way, way, way down.
Have to drop.
Or see what happens when a tax revolt occurs.
Yeah.
I had a couple of other items in there. I think I digressed a lot. But there's one really, really big thing that I've kind of sounded a little bit of a warning bell earlier in the year about appraisal services. I added $50,000 as a request if you want to have, I believe there's a certain property here in Shawnee County that we haven't appraised for 10 years. The last time we reappraised West Ridge Mall was 10 years ago. I hired David Craig and Company to appraise it at that time. They appraised it for $39.1 million. We know that property is on the market now, and or will soon be on the market. And we also know, or I know of the existence of appraisals that put that property significantly higher than we are now. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what the value of that property is, but I think we ought to find out. And I think we ought to hire somebody who's competent to appraise properties like that. And so I got just a figure of what would it cost, and so that I'm proposing $50,000.
What line item is that? Where
It's
is
not
it?
in there.
It's not in
It's
there.
after the bottom line of the $1,582,390. I added the $50,000 for appraisal services and the reclassification. And I also have a couple of other items that I'd like you to consider.
But that makes up the 172.
I think, we've been required by the state to do a few more things than we've ever been required previously. One is a scope of work statement, which is a really important document according to uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. And so I have prepared a scope of work. It's actually part of my strategic plan. And part of that is to identify properties that we are not competent to appraise. It doesn't mean we can't appraise those if you want us to. If you require that we appraise those properties, there are steps that we have to take in order to attempt to become competent to appraise those properties. However, I believe that the risks associated with that exceed whatever cost savings there might be. The $50,000 I've included there is $30,000 for the appraisal and $20,000 for expert witness fees, because there will be a trial. If we come up with $1 more than $39,100,000, there will be an appeal. So I'm asking for another $50,000 on top of what I've put in there is the flat amount for that, $6,731 for reclassification. Our ESRI is the company that provides us with our GIS software. We have, for several years, I put $30,000 in the budget to pay for our maintenance fees for ESRI software. And every year, I was able to get that funding out of the Land Records Fund. Well, because that was happening year after year after year, it got taken out of my budget a few years ago. And I never did put it back in. So it's not there this year, and I'm going to try to put it in for next year, because the Land Records Fund is no longer a reliable source of revenue. All of the revenue that it does generate has been earmarked for our new tax system. And so the SRI maintenance, annual maintenance, has to be paid for somewhere. We pared it down to $25,300. And so that will come due in December. And we've been late before, so if the money's there in the end of the year, that's what happened for 2013. I managed to have enough money left in my budget at the end of the year that we paid for the 2013 maintenance out of my budget, even though it wasn't officially budgeted. I don't know what we'll do at the end of this year. I guess we'll have to just wait and see. But I do think we should budget for that in 2015. And so that's what I'm asking in addition to what the flat amount is $25,300. We're also going to need to do another cap rate study. For our commercial properties, we typically, the majority of those, we use the income approach. The cap rate study is something that provides us with a very reliable, authoritative source for our cap rates. It takes one thing off the table that we have to one less thing to argue about when it comes time to when it comes appeal time. Income, expenses, cap rates. Those are the things that we argue about. Well, if you take the cap rate out of it, that's a big one. And so for $20,000, we've been doing these cap rate studies. The firm that we used to contract with, Tim Keller and Associates, has merged with David Craig and Company, which is a good thing. They're two really good outfits. And I don't really think that they're going to change much in the cost of doing cap rate studies. But the fact that they've combined their resources just makes it a more powerful and reliable cap rate. On pages 7, 8, 9 of my strategic plan, I outlined some threats to our continuing operation as a leader in the appraisal industry and to providing fair and equitable appraisals. I won't go into the details of all that, but on page 9, I asked for around $90,000 for 2 additional staff members. Those would be one for commercial and one for residential. Those would be appraiser trainees. And we got to get people, like I said earlier, some of our staff have been with the office for 20, 25 years. And we have a really specialized talent skill set that it takes a while to develop, and we don't find these people off the street. We find them off the street, and then we have to train them, and it takes years to get them up to speed. A couple of the things that have happened over the last few years when we've had to cut staff is our managers are not managing like as I would like them to. They have had to actually take hold and dig in and do some of the actual appraisal work rather than supervising the appraisal work. And that's good in a way. It helps keep their skills sharp and things like that. But some of the tasks that we're required to perform in order to be found in substantial compliance by the property valuation division, we just haven't been able to do. And, the sky's not falling or anything. But at some point in time, when human nature is such that if people know that you're not really following them around and checking everything they do, what happens? The quality of their work can deteriorate. I got a really, really, really good staff, and I'm not too worried about that. But the state is. They want us to do that QC. They want us to be out there supervising our employees. And if that was a big, big problem, that wouldn't be one of the things that we've had to let go. We would have reprioritized things, and there are other tasks that maybe we could have shaved a little bit over the last few years in order to free up the managers to do as much, like Belinda does, at least one residential model. She's our residential supervisor, and Steve has a big number of commercial properties that he handles himself, rather than supervising the staff. So I'm asking for another 2 appraisers. I believe on page 9, it kind of totals up. I think that's in the neighborhood of 90,000, 43,000 and 51,000, roughly, with salaries and benefits at the rate of pay that we bring people in as trainees for residential and commercial.
Commissioner Cook?
Mark, I know you haven't got to it or talked to it about it. You did mention the tax software. The county clerk and the treasurer both talked about costs that they're going to have with the implementation of the tax software. Are you anticipating any additional costs or training or issues with the implementation of the tax software?
No, not so much the tax software. I really don't have a lot to do with that. But we did acquire and convert to the CIC's personal property appraisal system. We converted from a vastly superior, this is the thing people don't ever do. You don't ever trade down. You know, we had a really, really good system, but to avoid the cost of having to buy an interface and the upfront costs associated with staying with our personal property appraisal system and then being able to interface with the new tax system, we just converted our personal property to the new personal property system, which already interfaces with the tax system, and they didn't charge us for that. So I took the $12,500 that I used to budget for our annual maintenance out of my budget for this year, or for 2015. I don't know what it's going to cost. We just went through the conversion, and it was really painful. And there's some really, really, really big gaps in the functionality between our old system and the new system. But they're having a symposium in Wichita maybe next week. And it's for appraisers only who use the personal property appraisal system. And we're going to go to that. We're going to try to absorb some of the proposed enhancements. It's my understanding that CIC is really good about listening to their clients and implementing changes and improvements to the system that everybody agrees they want. Their problem, the vendor's problem, is they hooked a really big fish. And some of the things that we've been asking for, they've been saying, first time we've ever heard of it, nobody else wants this, nobody else wants that. You're the only one, this and that and all this stuff. Well, we might open some eyes when we go to that symposium. And the other thing is, we've always had online filing for personal property. Because we insisted that be part of the system, they did build it in. It's pretty, we could only get it to work for property owners who didn't have any changes from last year to their personal property. They didn't add anything or delete anything. And so we're hoping we can get some of those things implemented, but I couldn't really tell you yet what the cost of those things will be. I'd like to be able to throw some money in there for enhancements, but who knows what it will cost. So far, all the things that we've asked them to do to enhance the system, I think, Betty, they've been really fair on the price. I was really surprised. We had one improvement, and I can't remember what it was, but it was only $715. And it was something really important, but it wasn't that expensive. So the answer, I guess, the short answer is, yeah, we're going to need to do some enhancements to that system, but I didn't put any money in there to do it because I didn't know how much it would cost. We'll limp by this year for 2015. We limp by this year. We'll limp by another year. Personal property, the legislature keeps eroding our tax base year after year after year. Personal property is becoming a less and less reliable source of revenue for property taxes, and it's becoming a less and less viable and necessary thing to really devote resources to. We're doing some cross-training with our real estate and our personal property staff, so that, you know, sometimes you have 3 employees, you need 2.5, you know. So we're taking that extra additional productivity and we're putting it to use.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Hickson?
Go ahead.
Eddie? Oh, yeah.
Well, just have a question. The proposal that you had given us, you were requesting, including the appraisal fees of 50,000 and the reclassification, was $1,702,897. Now, are you asking us to add to that
Well,
the cost of the?
what I was instructed to do is to submit a flat budget with the 27 pay periods.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm submitting to you, is $1,582,390.
But your
Period.
request doesn't total that.
No, everything below that line is additional funding that I'm requesting you consider adding to that number,
Below what line?
below the $1,582,390.
Okay, but your request up here is $1,646,000, so it's not the same as the flat budget. I'm confused.
Okay, that, I believe, includes the retirement amounts that are in,
60,000.
yeah. 60,844.33.
Okay, it's a little more than
But-
that, it's like 64, but okay, that's the majority of it, okay.
Yeah, you know, I think Lorna called me about that, and I said, that's probably, you know, the $60,000 is probably gonna cover us for any given year that we might have retirements. So I didn't change it. But she did fix my math, but I just didn't change
Okay,
my
okay.
bottom line. So, yeah, to clarify, if you wanted from me a budget proposal that was flat, but for the 27th pay period, that's the number that's in bold, 1,582,390. Everything that I've talked to you about today is in addition to that. The 50,000 for the appraisal, the 6731 for reclassification, 25,300 for ESRI maintenance, $20,000 for cap rate study, and then about $93,000 for 2 additional staff members, appraisers. Those are,
So that totals to what?
I didn't add that up.
That'd be about $1 million.
I mean, just
Eight.
that additional,
$1,000,008.
Yeah, we're getting close to 2.
so, but the difference is then about,
Oh, from the
yeah, the
flat,
difference, yeah, from the flat,
300,000.
300,000.
I mean,
So-
round figures, but yeah.
So I'm gonna ask Mark, as far as prioritizing those needs, what would come first? He's still. Yeah, Betty thought it was about 300,000, is that correct?
It'd be a little under that, but yeah.
Plus or
And then-
minus 10%.
$219,731.
Without the, because the retirements you're factoring in, okay.
Yeah, well, you're right, Betty, it's about 380 with the 60,000 for the retirements
Yeah.
too. So, to prioritize, you know, I think it's irresponsible of me to do that without talking to my staff, because they're the ones that, when I make a mistake, they're the ones that have to pay
Yeah,
for it.
Well, I appreciate that, but I
But that
guess,
needs to be done.
yeah, I
that's the
guess
point.
that's just, looking at all the needs, and that's what you're here to
Mhm.
do, is present all your needs to us.
Let me just, you want me to just kind of do a 1, 2, 3, 4,
Well,
5?
if you
and
want to
then-
get back with us,
I
I
will.
Yeah,
think that'd
no,
be
that's
fine
fine.
too,
Okay.
if you
And
want
that's
to check
fine,
with
yeah.
them. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think just to give some guidance, at least I would prefer,
Right, yeah.
as we're looking at all these budgets and
Yeah.
realizing that the reality of receiving that much
Yeah,
more in
because
the
that's-
budget is
that's
gonna be tough.
Dramatic, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
realistic, to be
Yeah.
honest with you, Mark.
But yeah, if you could get back
Yeah.
the chair or Betty, and
That'd be
Betty could
great.
get that information to us. That'd be good.
The point I'd like to make, just, this is, it's like my cholesterol. My doctor told me it's kind of a slow mover, you know, so if that cholesterol medicine's causing you some cramps and things like that, go off of it and see what happens. You know, there are departments where the wheels fall off real quick if you underfund or neglect them. Mine doesn't. But the cost to cure goes up exponentially over the years when it does finally reveal itself that our values are not as fair and equitable as they need to be, and we've got to put some money back into this department. So I would like to sincerely implore upon you to give some very serious consideration to putting some money back in this department. I took too much out of it. I took about as much out of it as you could before we started getting our budgets cut. I talked to Commissioner Bueller about this. She's heard this story before. And I really, you know, I feel some empathy for the captain of the Titanic, watching it go down and nothing you can do about it. And so I don't want that to happen. I've been here since 1993, and this is my life's work. And I've been privileged to work with some really, really talented people. And like I said, they're the ones responsible for the fact that we have some of the best, most accurate, equitable, fair appraised values in the state of Kansas. And I have a lot bigger perspective because I've served on the International Association of Assessing Officers in lots of different capacities as committee chair and as on the executive board. And so I've networked with people from all over the world. And there isn't any state in this whole entire country who has higher standards for ad valorem tax appraisals than the state of Kansas does. And there's nobody in the state of Kansas who does a better job than we do in Shawnee County. And I defy anybody to prove me wrong on that. And so I got a little pride of ownership here, and I'd like to see it maintained, but I'm not Chicken Little, and I'm not going to tell you the sky is falling because that would be an insult to your intelligence. It just isn't. But at some point, something's got to go back into this department. We've cut past the fat, into the meat and the bone. And
When's the last time we did a cap rate study? 2013, so last year. Well, in full disclosure, my wife Margaret does contract work with Keller and Associates, and so obviously I couldn't vote on that contract, but I don't know how that would impact how I could vote on the appraiser's budget or budget overall, and I'd have to talk to the county counselor about that. But I did want full disclosure on that, that I do have a conflict of interest to some degree.
with me, having Marg work there is reassuring. It is one more reason we
Reassuring
want,
to me too.
Yeah. There's one more reason we want to do business with
Okay.
them.
Okay.
Uh,
I wanted to make sure that was known. I don't want anybody to say, okay,
Yeah, well,
We
We-
were using them long before Mark got there.
okay.
yes.
Regardless, that, you understand.
Mhm.
I'd just like full disclosure on something like that.
So when I go twisting arms and busting thumbs, I need to just focus on your colleagues.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the appraiser? Kevin, Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Bueller? All right, we have, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Steve,
Thank
good
you.
to see you. Mark, good to see you.
Thanks for
We have
coming.
the HR director, and let's take 5 minutes and get